Hey everybody, thanks for joining me for Rooftops today. My prayer is that this would encourage you and challenge you to activate your faith as you hear God speak to you. So today's topic is going to be about significant parts, okay? That'll make sense hopefully as we get into it a little bit. So I have this fiddle fig plant that I've had now for 2 or 3 years. It was given to me by my stepmom, so it's a little bit sentimental, and I've been working hard on it. I don't really have a green thumb, but it's recently really taken off. It's doing really good. It's actually taller than I am right now. And when I got it was maybe a foot, okay? And so it's doing good. And the thing about my plant is that it has one really tall, large shoot, and it's got all the great leaves and all that jazz. And then it has a smaller shoot that started growing in the pot as well with it. And it's much, much smaller. And it has leaves, but again, it's just much smaller in comparison to the larger one. And so I had this bright idea, and I was thinking, okay, I think to make that one large shoot grow even taller, be more healthier, have bigger leaves, I'm going to just cut off that smaller one. And my reasoning behind it was it's going to use all of its nutrients, all of the plant's efforts would go to that one big one, and it would just be this huge, luxurious plant, right, in the end. And so that's what I did. I cut the extra shoot off, and all was well, so I thought. So the next morning, I wake up, and as I'm coming into my kitchen, I see the plant laying on the floor. And I thought for sure, it snapped. The branch has snapped, and it's over, So I was a little bit sad. And as I got closer, I realized it actually hadn't snapped. It was just leaning to the point where it was just parallel, on my floor, but it was still intact. So I was excited about that. But the point is I had no idea that small branch that I cut off, it was actually tied to the larger branch, that it could be supporting the larger shoot in the way that it was. It just was kind of shocking to me. And of course, like I said, I thought by removing the smaller shoot and the larger one standing by itself that it was going to become stronger that way. But by cutting the little one down, it actually made the big one weaker. And so by now you're realizing I am not the greatest gardener of all time, that's for sure, to say the least. But God is a great gardener, and his way of doing things we know is to prune what is already bearing fruit. The little one did have leaves on it, you guys, but it just wasn't significant enough in my eyes, I guess. And so what God would do is prune what is already bearing fruit so that it will eventually bear more fruit. But that wasn't my operation. I just put all the emphasis on the larger, more important branch. I wanted it to thrive, it to be the main thing. In John 15, 2, it says, "Every branch in me," Jesus says, "that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes that it may bear more fruit." So God sees the smaller, the less significant parts as important, as vital. So I'm just taking some tips from my plant experience and sharing them with you today. Sometimes the seemingly smaller or the lesser things are actually having a greater impact in our lives than we give them credit for. Maybe right now, if you just take a moment and think about who or what things in your life are supporting you, or maybe have supported you in the past, helped you to get to where you are today, or still supporting you and helping you to be able to stand. I actually think about my grandma in this situation, because when we were younger in ministry, not that I'm old, but when our kids were little and we were younger, one of our primary purposes in life was to be a present parent, right? And so there was all this ministry opportunity around us, but my primary focus was on God, but it was also on my kids as well. And so my grandma really stepped in, and my kids loved being with her. and she loved being with them. And so she just created opportunity so often for them to come and hang out with her and spend time with her, and which created opportunity for us to do different ministry tasks. And I look back at that and I think, had it not been for her supporting us, it changed us. God moved in us in a way that was so wonderful and caused us to grow, but also the ministries that we were actively involved in. We could have never have done that. We could have never made that impact had it not been for her supporting us. And yet my little old grandma that's 5 foot, 5'1" maybe, going to be actually 84 this coming weekend, like no one really knew her name. She wasn't preaching, she wasn't teaching, she wasn't doing all those things, but she had such an impact in ways that were so great. So think of your body, okay? Think of our bodies and all of the parts that make up our body, and we know that they're all important. And really, most of us, if we got to choose like which body part would we be in the body, in the natural body, there's certain parts like we just wouldn't pick. If we're being honest, for example, we probably wouldn't pick to be the armpit, okay? There's other parts that maybe seem more pleasant or more attractive. And really, there's other parts. I don't think I need to go into detail about what they are and name those. You get the picture, but they're very useful. But you probably wouldn't choose to be that because, again, they may not be the most attractive or even our preferred parts, our favorite parts. They may just not seem to have much significance to us. They may seem like the lesser parts, but they're extremely helpful to us. And the thing is, here's the key, is they're placed there by God in order to make us healthy, in order to help us to operate and function correctly. And so for this reason, because all of the parts are placed by God, we're to place value on them and to honor them. I want to read 1 Corinthians 12, starting in verse 23. It says, "And on those parts of the body that we think less honorable, we bestow the greater honor, and our unpresentable parts are treated with greater modesty, which our more presentable parts do not require. But God has so composed the body, giving greater honor to the part that lacked it." We need these less honorable parts. So maybe you've kind of felt like that before, like, I kind of feel like I'm more of an insignificant part in the whole, in the bigger picture, or even in the body of Christ. I know sometimes I have felt that before, and I've disqualified myself before I can even step out and see how God might use me, like what he might want to do with me. I mean, I've said things to myself like, let them do this or let them do that. I mean, after all, they're better at it than I am. And while sometimes that's true, right? Like sometimes people are more fitted for a certain task. That can be the case. The point is, we don't want to end up talking ourselves out of being more involved with the mission of Christ and what he's doing on this earth because we don't value ourselves and the gifts that he's given us. So over the years, God has placed some really amazing people in my life, and I really look up to them for various things. Like I appreciate all of they do and just how they do it. Like they encourage me in their abilities, but I can't be just like them because I'm not them. God's wired us all differently. So I need to trust that God's made me the way that I am, and that there's purpose in that I'm needed at the table, that I'm a significant part to the whole. We all need to know that. Or maybe, which is kind of funny to me, maybe you actually more relate to being the more significant part. Sometimes we tend to think that we're all that in a bag of chips, even if we don't say it, right? Like, this cannot go on if I'm not there, or what would this look like, if I was out of the picture. So I want to read 1 Corinthians 12, 19, starting in 19. I want to read it out of the Message translation because it's just really good. But I also want you to think about how this keeps your significance from getting blown up into self-importance. For no matter how significant you are, it is only because of what you're a part of. So I want to read that again. No matter how significant you are, it is only because of what you're part of. An enormous eye or a gigantic hand wouldn't be a body, but a monster. What we have is one body with many parts, each its proper size and in its proper place. No part is important on its own. So we need to realize that we are significant, but it's because of what we're a part of. Like we are part of Christ. We find our value by being in Him. We're part of the family of God. And the truth is, like, if we're all just being real, like we were all the lesser and the insignificant parts until Christ came and made our life significant through connection with Him. And then it goes on and it says, can you imagine an eye telling hand, get lost, I don't need you? Or head telling foot, you're fired, your job has been phased out. As a matter of fact, in practice, it works the other way. The lower the part, the more basic and therefore necessary. You can live without an eye, for instance, but not without a stomach. When it's a part of your own body you are connected with, it makes no difference whether the part is visible or clothed higher or lower. You give it dignity and honor just as it is, without comparisons. If anything, you have more concern for the lower parts than the higher. If you had to choose, wouldn't you prefer good digestion to full-bodied hair? I think that's funny, but you get the point. So there's just these parts that seem to be less attractive and less important to us, but they're actually of great value to God and to us. And so I want to give you guys maybe a challenge this week. Who could we honor? Who could you think of to honor that maybe you haven't really noticed or given much attention to? Romans 12:10 says, love one another with brotherly affection, outdo one another in showing honor. What would that even look like? Like, just think about that for a second, to outdo one another in showing honor. How could I do that? How could I make that practical in my life in honoring others? What things might we do to show them that we honor them, that they matter? Maybe one of the most basic things we could do is just reach out to them, right? And let them know that we appreciate them and how much value that they add to our lives. So I hope that you're really going to consider that, like how we could help other people thrive, maybe even what we haven't noticed, maybe even parts of the body that we've seen less important, because the truth is we're stronger together. So don't make the same mistake that I did, thinking that my plant would be better off solo, because now I have to go out and try to find a stick or something to support my plant so that it doesn't die and it can actually stand up on it, upright. So none of us are an island. That's the thing. So yeah, keep connecting with those that you already see as significant, as adding value. But also let's be intentional about connecting with those who don't seem to be big contributors to our lives. I find that human nature just tends to kind of lean towards surrounding ourselves with those who benefit us, right? And so we have this great example, though, to learn, and it's in Jesus, that although He, being the all-important one, that He left heaven and He humbled Himself, becoming like us in the form of a man and paying for our sins by dying on the cross. And He did all of that. And that's really just a nutshell of all Jesus has done for us. But He did all that because of the value that He saw in you and I. Aren't you thankful that Jesus came to connect with you, even though He didn't have to and He really didn't need to, that He saw you, that He sees you today as significant. So let's value and connect and honor all the parts. And most importantly, let's value and honor Jesus, because we've got to connect and abide in Him. This is the only way that we're going to be able to stand and not fall. So I hope that encouraged you today. Thanks for joining me for Rooftops.